Very good morning and welcome to a day packed with massively relevant and insightful talks from industry leaders and innovators. The team here at Rail Technology Magazine has been really busy behind the scenes, preparing an event which promises to inspire education, innovation and collaboration within the community. It's worth noting that all the content from today is CPD certified. So for every hour of content you watch today, you'll earn 1 CPD point. The RTM 365 team will issue your individual CPD certificates following the event. Now, aside from the talks, there are several other opportunities to network at each break. Using the speed networking functionality, you can connect and learn from other delegates here today. Regardless of whether you've been to one of our RTM 365 virtual events before, or if you're new to the platform, you'll hopefully be interested to hear that we are building more than just a series of singular disconnected events. We've really taken the time to listen and have created a platform that will allow you to access a wealth of resources and continue to provide networking opportunities. Located all in one place, this platform, or community as we like to call it, is intended to share useful information long after today's event is over. So please do jump into the digital marketplace to gain access to valuable insights you and your teams can digest at your leisure. Without support from our partners, events like these simply wouldn't be possible. Focusing on what is a topical giant following the Williams-Shapps report, there is nothing more relevant than passenger experience. We'll be discussing fragmentation, complicated ticketing, unreliable even, just putting her teeth in, and disconnected services, and how to make these experiences of the past. The outcomes being explored should pose a vision of a high quality, connected journey, punctual, consistent services, simpler digital ticketing, and a green railway that meets the needs of the nation. Overall, delivering change to the rail industry with customers at the forefront of our services. And there's another benefit to today's proceedings, a bit of friendly competition to reward you for your hard work. Score points by engaging with the platform's different elements and potentially earn yourself a choice of reward come the end of play. Our gamification tools will be active throughout the day with an up-to-date leaderboard tracking delegate progress. Those who finish in first, second, and third places, respectively, will have the choice of 3 different prize options to a total of 250, 150, and 100 for each of the positions. So you can choose either Amazon vouchers, a donation to a charity of your choice, or what I think is really cool, planting an equivalent number of trees. Whatever resonates most with you is fine by us. But of course, you can only be in with a shout by getting out there and engaging. So join a live session. There's 50 points earned. Make a connection with another delegate in the platform, 100 points. Ask a question in a session or engage with one of our exhibitors, another 50. I'm sure you get the gist. And finally, as we get ready to hand across to our first speaker, do feel free to share interesting things you hear throughout the day across social media using the hashtag RTM365. That's hashtag RTM365. So let's kick off. First on our virtual stage is Rufus Boyd, Programme Director of Passenger and Freight Services in the Great British Railways Transition Team at Network Rail. Rufus will be discussing passengers losing trust in the railways, as identified by Keith Williams 2 years ago, noting the coronavirus pandemic has magnified this challenge, resulting in changes to market. GBR's TT's role in relation to the government and the DfT will also be explored to address the changes needed in the sector. So it's my very great pleasure this morning to welcome Rufus.
Thank you, Helen. And just to confirm, I am indeed Rufus Boyd, Programme Director of Passenger and Freight Services at GBR-TT, but I just wanted to say I'm going to address those things in that order. Just a little bit about myself and then a bit about GBR-TT and why I talk about myself on an important event like this, because I think it's important to know where people come from, what they've learned, and perhaps even what prejudices they bring to a problem. So I come to GBR-TT after 34 years in the rail sector. I was a BR graduate trainee with roles in frontline operations. I was at Railtrack, the infrastructure manager during privatisation. I was a commercial director at Southwest Trains and Stagecoach. I was a bidder there. And after a couple of years in Australia, where I was trying to design a passenger experience from a blank piece of paper on the new metro they were building in Sydney, I've spent my last 10 years as a management consultant in the transport sector. So that's my prejudices and my background and where they come from. But for the last 2.5 years, I have been working on the Williams-Shapps review for Andrew Haynes. And more recently, since the white paper, been working for him as part of GBRTT, and I will come back to that later. What is worth recalling, and Helen called it, was 2 years ago, Keith Williams had already started to identify that there was an erosion in passengers' trust in rail, and that was really arising from their direct passenger experience. The white paper is really good on this, and my working assumption is always that people have read it, but let me just remind you some of the detail. They identified that the customer experience is stressful, unsatisfactory across the journey stages, so not just on train, but across the stages. That passengers find pricing confusing, complain about value for money. They find stations difficult to get around, difficult to use. That service punctuality and reliability, whilst relatively speaking at a historic high, remained a #1 priority for improvement. Experience on board trains was inconsistent, the toilets didn't work, the Wi-Fi didn't work, the sockets may or may not work, and communications to passengers before, during and after journeys can cause anxiety rather than reassure. Now that's a pretty damning indictment of where the railways were in 2019, but COVID has only magnified this challenge to a completely new level. COVID initially took the railway to an extraordinary historic low of passenger journeys, in some cases, in some places, only 5% of pre-COVID levels. But even now, that number is barely 60%. And although there is some evidence that this August there's been a bit of a recovery, i.e. an increase in the speed of recovery, there are some worrying things in the numbers. A huge variation between the degree to which leisure has bounced back, now over 70% of pre-COVID levels, but the relatively poor performance of commuter and business, which is just scraping above 30% of its pre-COVID levels. What this means for us is that discretionary travel is now a much higher weight in our customer flow mix than before, and that traditional inelastic markets on which the railways have relied, such as commuting, are both smaller in size and subject to new competition. There is actually a new player in the market, and that is working from home. Now, if Williams was saying that the rail industry needed a better and more consistent product at a clearer price, many customers are actually not in a position to undertake that value for money assessment because their needs are changing. So let me take me, for example. I come in on an hour-long journey from Winchester to London. It costs me about £40 if I walk up on the day, single leg. Now, if I buy a weekly season, I can get that number down to nearer £14, £15 a leg. That's a relatively simple calculation, which I ought to be able to make if I travel to London every day. But what if I only travel 3 days a week or 2 days a week? Well, for 3 days a week, that number's kicked up again to £23. So suddenly the calculation's becoming quite difficult to assess the value for money proposition. But price is increasingly only half the story. Affordability does remain important, and clearly value for money remains ever present. But my 60-minute journey is actually a 90-minute journey when you add travel to and from the station, waiting time, and to use the language of the transport economists, my generalized journey time is higher when the frustrations of delays and waiting are thrown in. Whatever, it's very clear that these are precious hours to me, and I now have choices. So our best prospect for attracting people back to rail may well be to address the issues of the passenger experience. And I can't think of a better example of something that absolutely needs to be reliable now than the performance of the Wi-Fi and the local mobile network, as well as the predictability of the service for reliability, punctuality, and ease of use. I think especially the point of retail, and Helen's advised that that will be a key focus for today. Quite simply, today's challenge will be to avoid any passenger saying, I would have been better off staying at home. Now, all of this circles us back to GBR transition team. Our role, and we are a transition team, we're not an executive agency, our current role is to support the government and the Department for Transport and address the passenger priorities in the white paper and bring the sector together prior to legislation when Great British Railways will be formally set up. In my view, we can do this by doing two fundamental things. First, address some of those pain points in the white paper. We know about a lot of these: reservations, booking horizons, out-of-date retailing and fares concepts. But second, by creating a new culture of customer focus. Now, I must say at this point, that means more than just passenger focus. It will include freight customers, by the way, but that is another part of the story for a different time. Of course, some of this does need institutional changes. We will in particular need to bring together expertise from Rail Delivery Group, Network Rail, DfT, and ourselves at GBRTT to deliver. This is a rather dull but actually necessary first step to getting reform to work. But we must also start to be clear with the supply chain, I'm thinking wider than train operators here, of the role that they can play. So they can plan, they can resource and execute the arrangements. What we need, I think, is one plan, one timeline for each of the commitments set out in the new deal for passengers in the white paper. I think the other necessary thing is that we, and I mean GBRTT here, but other players as well, are very visible and are explaining who we are and the role we undertake. At the moment, that is just advice and influence, while others in the sector remain bound by contracts and accountabilities to get on with the task. But we can make a difference, and I'd just like to talk about a few things that we are doing currently by way of evidence. First of all, we've signed a memorandum of understanding with Rail Delivery Group, and this has allowed us to start talking with them about bringing together the industry critical functions together in 2022. Now, that is subject to Secretary of State approval, but do not underestimate the critical role that RDG plays in making so much of this a success. We are collaborating very directly with the department to make sure that their new contract form, the so-called Passenger Services Contract, or PSC, is given full effect to the intention set out for it in the white paper, the concession model. We're working with owning groups and have set up a rail revenue recovery group, which is now planning on how to build back that revenue base that has been so diminished. You may have seen the advert with the tagline, "Let's get back on track," which was launched on Monday, evidence of real action, which we were able to coordinate with individual talk ad campaigns to create something of bow wave of rail presence on media. We're working with RDG and Network Rail to create a programme of improvements for customers that we will drive forward if the Secretary of State so approves. And finally, we are playing our part in creating the business case to bring rail's retail proposition up to sector norms, and by sector I mean the retail sector norms, in terms of deployment of digital technology. That is all subject to a spending review, but we've put our best foot forward with that. Now, all of this together, for me, is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to address things. It's easily said, but I've been around 34 years, and I've not seen a change opportunity as great as this since the days of liberalisation and privatisation in the early 90s. Williams-Shapps has been absolutely clear on direction, and it's clear that the Secretary of State wants Andrew Haynes to provide some plans for getting on with things. And we know what the things to be done are. They've been long identified. It's just execution that's the issue. We will be a vehicle for that if the Secretary of State supports Andrew's proposition, which we submitted at the end of July. But execution of the plan is for people in this virtual room today. The new passenger experience will be delivered by the wider sector, the TOCs, of course, suppliers, old and new, academia, current staff, and staff who are yet to be recruited, quite probably in a new image, not the image speaking to you now. All of this needs to be done working collaboratively which in and of itself will be a new experience, I suspect, with the appropriate customer focus and exceptional commercial mindset. It will quite simply need a reinvigoration of the sector with a new drive, a new energy, and an absolute briskness to get things done. We have less time than we think. And although I will be dipping in and out today, I very much look forward to hearing some of that energy, some of that drive in the presentations and Q&A today. Thank you.
Rufus, thank you very much for starting today's conference off. I think you're right when you say this is a once in a generation opportunity. It's fascinating to understand a bit more about the loss of inelastic market size as discretionary markets grow. So really positive start. I think you've set the scene really well. Thank you very much for doing that for us. Well, next this morning, we have our first leaders debate on improving passenger confidence. After the March 2020 lockdown, passenger numbers, as you heard from Rufus there, quickly fell as people were asked to stay at home unless travel was vital. The rail industry did an excellent job supporting other essential workers get to where they needed to be to save lives. Passenger numbers are now slowly creeping up, but are still way below pre-pandemic levels. And the reasons proposed as to why passenger numbers haven't returned to their pre-COVID levels is due to a lack of customer confidence when it comes to cleaning and social distancing adjustments. Now, whilst these measures are now in place, it's not been without its challenges, investment often entering the conversation. What also comes to mind when considering the need to put the customer first is the access to live information and the innovative solutions available throughout the supply chain behind delivering this real-time information. So today we're asking what changes we expect to see to entice passengers back onto the network. And to help me explore this, I'm delighted to be joined by Nick Kite, Sales and Business Development at Keytech Systems, and Jeff Grant, Stakeholder Manager, Passenger for Transport Focus. So great to have you both with us today. Thank you very much for joining us. I just wondered what your thoughts were. Were you able to listen to Rufus's opening address? And if so, what did you think to what he said? Perhaps I can start with you, Nick.
So caught part of it. I mean, absolutely putting the customer at the centre of the new reforms, the new structure, absolutely essential. And you know, in our role, very much is to play a big part in that as the supply chain. You mentioned the importance of customer information. That's absolutely at the heart of what we do. So really pleased to see the restructure, increased focus on the customer. And the raised importance around customer information and you know, how that supports ease of travel, predictability, and trust in the rail, and making rail the first choice travel.
And Jeff, your thoughts?
It was very much struck a chord with what our research from passengers is telling us. So very relevant, very informative, and a really good way to set the benchmark for the day, I think, Helen.
Great, and I'm pleased to say I maybe was looking slightly distracted there because I was wondering where Johnny Wiseman was, but I'm pleased that Johnny's now popped up on our screen. So welcome to you, Johnny, Customer Experience Director, West Midlands Railway. It's good to have all three of you now. We've all been through unprecedented times over the last 18 months, and I'd like to ask all of you about maybe the lessons the rail industry can take from those 18 months that will help us, you know, really harness this sort of opportunity of a generation, as Rufus calls it, and make the railways better. Nick, will you kick us off?
So I think you know, I think it's great to see the restructure, Great British Railways, the new service contracts with the train operators, the new ways of working. We engage with all of the train operators and the financing organisations behind rail in the UK. And it's great to see that level of investment. I think, you know, for us, the missing piece is, you know, the joined up journey information. Actually, from the time you decide to take a journey through to, you know, getting to the station, being in the station, getting onto the train, and that importance of how that should be easy, reliable, real time, informative. And you know, that's key for us. That's, you know, that's key to customer confidence. And I think traditionally the industry has been quite siloed in terms of some of its decision making. And I think we enjoy being challenged us. We're the experts in how this technology can help. Don't solutioneer yourselves would be our message to the industry. Don't necessarily look to startups or smaller organizations for all the answers. We've got plus 20 years of expertise in this. We can absolutely help. Challenge us, present us with your use cases, and we can really help provide that joined up journey information, which is absolutely key to confidence on the rail.
Johnny, your thoughts on what we can take away from the last 18 months and how we can improve things?
Yeah, I'm sure like everyone else, I wouldn't want to live through the last 18 months again. And like most organisations, unfortunately, we've lost colleagues and we've lived through some very dark days. But there are some very important lessons that we at West Midlands Trains and the industry have learned that we need to continue to build on as we recover from the pandemic and we build a railway that's fit for the future. The key things for me that we need to take away are pace. The rail industry historically has been very slow, very set in its ways. Because of the pandemic, we've had to move at pace. We've delivered timetable changes multiple times since last March, where normally the industry has been stuck with, we can only change timetables twice a year. We've collectively demonstrated that we can do that quickly. We can be agile, we can respond to customer needs, to instructions from clients because of things like having to take cost out, low passenger numbers. We need to continue to be able to work at that pace. Now, I'm very conscious that has put immense pressure on certain parts of the industry, but we need to find ways to keep that in place and support those people who have been put under immense pressure, because we're going to be expected to be able to do this going forward. We've had shared collective outcomes, so whether you're network rail, individual train companies or other parts of the supply chain, we've worked together far better than we ever have done in my 17 years experience in the rail industry. And we've done that for the betterment of the customer experience. And that collaborative approach we've got to build on. And that's not just everyone agreeing with each other and nodding politely. That's challenging each other. Nick mentioned that. We need to continue to challenge each other. We need to be challenged by customers and stakeholders. And we will respond to that challenge, because everyone who works in the rail industry does it because they care. They want it to the best it can be. But the two key things for me is if we can continue to work at pace and collaborate effectively, they would be the two most important lessons I'd take out of the last 18 months.
And Jeff, John is saying pace and work effectively, collaboratively. Do you agree with that? And what would you add to that?
I agree 100% with everything that Johnny has said. For me, there are two things. The passenger's expectation has changed dramatically, and what's important to them has adjusted as a result. I think passengers, as Rufus mentioned earlier, are now making different journeys at different times for different reasons, want different ticketing options to flex around that. And in that, the old model of railway working won't work sustainably going forwards. In the past, we've been very focused on satisfaction, and what satisfied passengers is always going to be important, and it will always be around punctuality, it'll be around reliability of service, and it'll be around value for money. But I think you can now add to that passengers want very different and enhanced information. As Nick has said, they want flexibility in their travel options, but they want the basics done to an exceptional standard. So they want to have space, they want to feel they're in a clean environment. So to sum that up, satisfaction will always be important, but the confidence to travel, to be satisfied is completely different.
And Nick, how would the industry, do you think, define passenger confidence?
So, I think it's about how easy it is. So, I leave my house in the morning to go on a journey. Do I get in my car, or do I take the train? What's the first choice of travel? If it's easy for me, it's predictable, I can trust in rail travel. That to me instills confidence, and that in turn has got to lead to a loyalty in the rail as a travel method of travel, repeat business and revenue. So it's it's a win-win. Get it right in terms of passenger confidence, and the rail industry will in turn benefit and be able to invest further. So I think it's just that cycle of ease, predictability, trust, all key factors in instilling confidence.
I think ticketing and pricing, which we'll explore later in the day, is also key. I was in a situation the other day when I was trying to get to Glasgow, and it was cheaper to take a flight than it was a train. And I wanted to take the train. I'm a great fan of the railways, and I love a rail journey. It's a great way for me of relaxing or working. And instead I went to Heathrow. And so I think we'll explore ticketing and how to get the sort of best deals as well. It was something that Rufus touched on. But I mean, there's interesting. I thought his statistics were interesting that he came out with in his opening address there. Rail is barely 60% of the pre-COVID numbers, with leisure more than 70%, but business barely scraping 30%. I mean, there's a lot to get back in terms of numbers, but Nick, passenger experience is also one of the key measures of success for the railway. And do you think we're doing enough to improve passenger experience? There's lots of talk about all these positive things we can do, but are we seeing enough action?
So I think there's a couple of things here. One is, where we have, where our customers have provided enhanced passenger information on trains, they have seen increase in industry NRPS scores, so customer satisfaction scores. And significant increases. Some of our customers have seen 7 to 10% in 12 months. That's an unprecedented increase. So it's proven that providing more information about where you are on your journey, connections at the next station, information about disruption, information that helps you make decisions and helps you with your choices. That's way beyond a lot of what's offered today, which is a scrolling LED display, which tells you what the minimum information. So absolutely, it's proven that does make a significant difference. That's readily available, and that's been readily available for many years. Disappointingly, what we're seeing is lots of new trains being introduced, which well below that. And our advice to the industry is set the bar high, set the bar higher, in line with customer expectations. You mentioned the increase in leisure traveller. That's even more important for the leisure traveller. They're not hardcore commuters. That having that kind of information is even more important. So set the bar higher. The technology is available today. It's well proven. It's disappointing to see customer information that was looks like it's 5 or 6 years out of date being delivered on new trains. It's a far better experience on refurbished trains from our perspective.
Johnny, what about your passengers in the West Midlands? What sort of feedback do you get on the current service? How satisfied are your customers?
So I think it's a very difficult question to answer in very broad terms, because every customer experience is different. And as an industry, we try and lump everyone into the same boat or train, if you like. It very much, Jeff spoke about it before, passengers want to see the basics. They want to see trains that turn up on time and they run reliably. And that is something that we were able to deliver during the pandemic, but it's something we're struggling with now as we try and catch up on things like driver training, which has been slowed down during the pandemic. I think if we can consistently deliver the basics, have a reliable train service that is clean, whether people can have space or not depends on how popular we are. So the number of trains we have is limited as an industry. It takes time to introduce them. But customers, if you can give them the information, Nick's quite correct. Information, trains that turn up on time and they're clean, it's reliable, it's predictable, they've got friendly staff to meet them. Customers are happy, they like taking the train. Helen, your experience is unfortunately a common one. The ticketing systems, ways of purchasing, the different types are far too complicated for the industry. And it's one of the areas that we've been speaking about reforming for a very long time. And it's one of those areas where we need to apply some pace to, because we do need to make it easy for customers. We need it to be a cheaper alternative to flying, because that fits in with the wider greener agenda. So we can help contribute to that. We've got significant challenges in the West Midlands in terms of infrastructure, rolling stock and driver availability. But what we do have is phenomenal staff who work day in, day out to welcome customers to the railway, to reassure them, helping customers who've got a bit additional accessibility needs. We have also seen our scores improve when you look at things like the interim National Rail Passenger Survey results. The Institute of Customer Service have told us what's good, and it's lovely to see those scores improve, but the perfectionist in me is always looking at the opportunities to develop further, and again, apply some of those lessons from the last 18 months that we spoke about earlier.
I think when we explore ticketing later, another thing that would be quite useful to explore, and again, just speaking from a regular rail user, is, you know, when you turn up and you've got your expensive ticket, because rail is quite expensive often, and then you see a train sitting on the platform and you've from the same operator, and you're half an hour early and it's empty, and they say you can't jump on that because your ticket's named a specific thing. I think there's a lot of progress to be made in ticketing, which will really help inspire passenger confidence. But Johnny, you mentioned dark days at the beginning, and I know you played a very key role in keeping the network safe during the pandemic. And I'm guessing that was a real opportunity for you to see your staff really shine.
Yeah, I can't speak highly enough about our staff, but also railway staff across the entire industry. I think, like many other key workers, they did a phenomenal job. They all had their own personal fears, concerns. Many of them, as I said, have been poorly. Unfortunately, we have lost some colleagues, but they've continued to turn up to work day in, day out. They've operated the service brilliantly, but they've also shown their compassion, their enthusiasm, and their professionalism in welcoming customers back. One of the things that I've managed to keep true to is when you speak to customers, I try not to assume that they're regular rail customers. We've all taken a train journey for the first time, and actually people haven't used the trains for over 18 months and they're coming back in relatively large numbers. And our colleagues are maintaining that approach. They're welcoming customers back. They're making allowances for the fact that they might be nervous, that they might not understand some of the measures we've put in place. And it has been, I've been filled with pride as I've seen that right the way across the network. And as I said, my particular pride for my West Midlands trained colleagues, but it is something I've seen across the entire industry, and it is properly heartwarming.
That's good to hear. Jeff, you know, you're at the heart of, you know, passengers really. How have you seen expectations change? How has the pandemic changed what we want? And, you know, what sort of differences have you seen pre-COVID and post-COVID?
I think to really echo what Johnny was saying, just one of the key things that came out of our research and our insight was that passengers felt the most reassured when they saw staff and staff availability and visibility was there. It's absolutely key to them being confident enough to travel. I think something that it's worth mentioning as well is that we can't treat all passengers the same because their reasons and motivations are very different. And I think we understand our passengers more than we've ever done in the past. We've looked at, and I think around about half of passengers are either to some extent keeping calm and carrying on, or they're springing back really well in terms of a return to rail with a heavy onus on socialising. But the other half are cautiously still using the car and thinking about, is it safe for me to go back to rail? Some are anxious and affected by the pandemics, and some people are consciously thinking about how do I just reduce journeys overall, whether I choose to travel by train or another mode. So I think what we've got to do is not take a one cure fixes all approach, but overall passengers still want what they want. But the key thing is we did find that confidence in being able to travel fell as low as 40% at one point. For people who were not travelling, they didn't feel safe, they didn't feel confident. As Johnny has mentioned, that's significantly on the rise now, but nonetheless, we've got to appeal to different people's concerns to get them back and being confident to join us back on the railway.
We mentioned in the introduction, Jeff, that one of the concerns was, you know, the hygiene and cleanliness, you know, as we're all in sort of a different world where we're washing hands much more and worried about catching the virus. Was that one of the biggest sort of blockers, if you like?
I
concerned about that.
There were a number of things that people told us. So you're absolutely right, Helen. Cleanliness was a big one. If you look at where we are now, people are more satisfied with cleanliness on board than probably at any time in the past. But they were also concerned about face covering, social distancing, and the behaviour of other passengers as well. So I think what we've tried to do is look at what matters most to passengers. We put it into something called a passenger confidence barometer, so you can see how that's changed over time. It's a positive story, but there's still work to be done, undoubtedly. But interestingly, on the point of cleanliness, people were very impressed when they saw that cleaning taking place. So very often, the reassurance for people is, I believe more that it's happening if I see it happening in front of me. It was a very tangible thing that passengers told us.
I do think toilets still haven't got there. In my humble opinion, I'd still like to use a clean toilet on a train, but that's not.
I think you have a point there.
Yeah, that's not. Why can we not get that right? I really don't know why we can't get that right. Nick, the supply chain is very important, isn't it, in terms of helping operators identify, develop, and introduce innovative solutions? How can the supply chain make a difference?
So absolutely right. So and it kind of comes back to challenge us a little bit. I think I think we spend a lot of time with customers looking at, if you like, art of the possible. You don't know what you don't know, but you do know what you want to achieve. You do know what outcome you're trying to get to. You do know what kind of customer experience you want to deliver. And for us, it's just help us understand where your pain is, what outcomes, what you're trying to achieve. Challenge us with your use cases. Don't solutioneer. That's our role. That's what we do best. And we've got lots of well-proven solutions. Every day we're asked for something new. Just going back to what Jeff was mentioning around cleanliness and social distancing. Common request at the moment is around conveying those messages, using the information systems to convey the messages about, even video clips about how the trains have recently been cleaned, or social distancing, or understanding how busy coaches are, how busy, whether the next coach is busier, quieter than the one you're in. So lots of really relevant challenges. Don't always go and look for new entrants, market entrants. So, Keytech's been in the industry 20 plus years, lots of experience. We understand how to do this. But ultimately, don't just come to us with your challenges, your pain points, your use cases, and how you would build a business case around what it is you're trying to achieve. And we'll help with the technology and the solutions to help you achieve that.
What are the blockers, though, Nick? What hinders investment and integration of new technologies that would enhance the whole experience?
Sorry, Helen, I was jumping ahead a little there. It's a really good question. It's one I thought about, and I was hoping you'd ask, actually, because traditionally we find the industry, and it's not a criticism, but it's just traditionally quite siloed. There are, let's say, teams that look after customer information in stations and platforms, and there are teams that look after passenger information on trains. And sometimes there's a tendency to ask for more of the same. I've got a new fleet, or I've got a new station, and I want more of the same. So our advice would be set the bar higher. Set the bar very much up there and above, and in line with current and future customer expectations. Really ask for something, and we'll help you understand what's possible. And I think that's the thing. There's a tendency to ask for more of the same. Our advice would be, don't do that. Don't invest in silos. Look at bringing together your use cases, so joined up journey information. It's far more cost effective. Different ways of investing, different ways of defining your requirements. So I think that's, that in itself inhibits some of that investment, and it tends to cost the industry more for discrete point solutions which just do not deliver that joined up journey information.
Johnny, do you want to jump in there? Your thoughts on what Nick said there?
Yeah, I completely agree that the industry has been far too siloed, and that is one of the things that is starting to change post-pandemic, and with the new structure of the rail industry, there's already green shoots that we can see. I think we have to balance that with an affordability issue around the railway. I'm a Yorkshireman, so I always look for value for money. But I've been horrified over the last 17 years when I look at how much some schemes cost, and when you really dig into the detail, I don't think the rail industry, and I'm not talking about individual companies, but as an industry, I don't think we've scrutinised costs enough. I don't think we've demanded value for money. And I actually agree with Nick. I think sometimes we haven't set the benchmark high enough, and we've accepted substandard things. And this just gets layered on year after year. You accept overinflated costs, you accept substandards, and that becomes your norm. Actually, we should take pride in our industry, the service we provide. We should set that benchmark higher. And if we're buying services, we're buying goods, we should expect value for money for the taxpayer and for paying customers. And those savings should be passed on. The railway is expensive. Lots of the infrastructure is very old. If you buy a train, it's very expensive. The return on investment takes a significant amount of time. The changes that the industry is making are going to help, because in a privatized train company, which is where I've spent my career, you're always looking at a 7-year horizon at most for a franchise. And that era is coming to an end. So all of a sudden, as an industry, we can start looking at longer term business cases that will deliver value over decades, rather than just artificially timescales that are put in place because you're operating a franchise model. And that brings potential huge advantage, cost savings, and the ability for us to really set that benchmark, and to bring in lots of smaller companies, big companies. That diversity of thought, that innovation, that's going to be really, really important as we go forward.
And do you, Johnny, agree with Rufus that we are, once in a generation, we've got once in a generation opportunity now, which has probably focused our mind a bit because of COVID?
100%. This is an opportunity that I think we cannot afford to squander. I don't think we'll see it again in my lifetime, let alone career. I think the ability to change the structures, to take the opportunity to modernize. Modernization is a word that often scares people because it involves change. Change brings uncertainty. And all of that is true, but it also provides opportunity. And I think you wouldn't speak to anyone who works in the rail industry in any form who would say that they're happy with the way everything is, that they all have a whole long list of things that we can do better, that will drive cost efficiency, customer benefits, a whole litany of benefits. And we've got to grasp those now. And the reason I'm so excited about this is because when I look around, you asked me earlier about the pride that I have in how our colleagues have responded to COVID. But it isn't just our response to COVID, it's an industry that is full of people who want to make a difference. Now, whether that's very senior executives at the top of the industry or people who operate our services day in, day out. So we've actually got the raw materials we need to capitalise on this opportunity. And whilst I do know it will be unsettling for some people, the future of the rail industry has to feature colleagues. The rail industry needs really good quality people supporting it. We need to get through the uncertain times and then really start to build on this opportunity that Rufus was talking about earlier.
I think, Jeff, there really are exciting times ahead. And I suppose I've had a little peek of those exciting times through preparing our panel discussions for later in the day. But I think one thing we've got to be really mindful of as we embrace digital and tech is, from your point of view, Jeff, we have to make sure, don't we, that we still keep an inclusive railway system, and that not everybody's au fait with their smartphones or have smartphones, and that as we move into this exciting journey where, for me, I'd just like to sort of click on with my phone and get the best price and hop on a train, we've got to think of other people, haven't we, who perhaps don't find rail travel always easy.
You're absolutely right, Helen, and I think accessibility goes much wider than just physical accessibility and those sorts of areas. So I think that the kind of the rush to digital, I'm all for it, but I think what we can't afford to do is leave people behind. And I think what we've got at the moment, as Rufus mentioned, was we've got less commuters who were quite accepting and understanding of the railway disruption, delay, because they encountered it more often. When you've got more infrequent travellers travelling for leisure purposes, they don't make those assumptions on behalf of rail. So information in their language and in a totally accessible way is absolutely key.
I'm just realising that at the beginning of our debate, I didn't ask people for questions. So I was just having a sneaky look there. I'll need my glasses on for this to see if we've got questions in our box, and we have. So Nigel Strudwick says, encouraging people back is not just to improve the ticketing system, but to bring the prices down to a sensible level. In the context of the urgent need to address climate change ASAP, surely the best way to get people out of their cars is to reduce fares. Who can answer that one for me?
Well, I'm going to shamelessly say that West Midlands Trains has very, very good value for money tickets available every day of the week. But as a general point, I do think we need to look at our fares structure, and that model needs to be addressed through the different patterns that we are currently seeing emerging with the reduction of the commuter market. And I think this all ties into the wider piece about addressing the affordability of the rail industry and how we do things that offer better value for money, which will in turn allow us to look at the fares structure in combination with the simplification of the fare structure.
We've got to be careful, Jeff, haven't we? Because, you know, during the pandemic, when we weren't using the railways, we've been embracing other forms of transport, whether that be a rental bike or an electric scooter or walking sometimes. So I guess we've got to overcome that as well. You know, we've got to make sure people, from all of your point of view, choose rail over those other modes of transport.
You're absolutely right. And I think in that now wider market, rail's got to be competitive. And whilst I agree that cheaper fares would be beneficial to everybody, value for money is a relative thing. So people will look at what offers value for money in terms of time of the journey, in terms of convenience, in terms of a whole range of factors. More importantly now than ever, can I get a seat? Is there space on board? Those sorts of considerations. So yes, you're absolutely right. I'm in the West Midlands, same as Johnny, and we've now got electric scooters, bike hire, things like roll and stroll. So it's a competitive marketplace for how people choose to travel. But I still think the merits of rail speak for themselves. We've just got to make it an easy and almost a no-brainer choice for people to choose it.
Just briefly, Jeff, what's roll and stroll? I don't think I've come across roll and stroll, have I?
Roll and stroll is a Birmingham-based scheme. Transport for West Midlands brought it in, which was encouraging people to effectively get within a mile, 2 miles of the city centre by bike, gave them safe facilities to park their bike up and do the rest on foot or in reverse combination. So, yeah.
I like the phrase. There's a hashtag there, isn't there? I'm going to whiz through these questions. I haven't had a chance to pre-read them, so let's just go with it. Nick Late. When Claire Perry was Transport Minister, she said that annual season ticket holders are the industry's frequent flyers and should be rewarded for their loyalty rather than being taken for granted. Most annual ticket holders lost out with their COVID refunds. So should the industry be doing more to attract people back to that product? I guess that's a you question, Johnny. Did yours lose out?
And I think it's similar to my previous answer, which is we need to speed up how we address the whole fares structure, removing the complexity, looking at how we offer season tickets. I know flexible season tickets have come in very, very recently. They don't work for everyone, but that was always phase one of a much longer plan. And I certainly will be chomping at the bit behind the scenes to make sure that we put as much energy and pace into this as we possibly can.
Glyn just says there, Johnny, that you've made some very good points regarding the staff that kept going, and sadly, Glyn says that we've lost colleagues, so respect to all. A question that might perhaps be for you, Nick, or one that you might be able to take on. Stephen Rose says many workers have moved out of major cities into the countryside following the work from home concept during the pandemic. With flexible work arrangements between home and on-site, some commutes will be still encouraged. Has this been taken into consideration? Are there contingency plans to cater for flexible working, i.e. flexible travel pricing, better commute links and transport?
So not sure about pricing, but certainly putting the technology in the in people's hands. So not having to rely on informations and screens on stations and other platforms, but actually making that information available on your mobile device at home. So before you start your journey, as you start your journey, if you're living in a small village and you just have a small, a single platform and a shelter, having that information on your mobile device, probably fits nicely with that balance of home working and still being connected, still being better informed.
Graham Collett says one of the major issues in the Williams-Shapps paper is addressing accessibility, which we touched on a moment ago with Jeff. We welcome the programme of tackling stations by Atkins, but what about the rolling stock? Will GBR end the present free-for-all on new train design to ensure that all stock is fully accessible? Jeff, thoughts on that?
I think in terms of accessibility, it's something that our organisation will have more of a role in moving forward. So I think in terms of design, you've got to be in there at a very, very early stage, even to have an impact in a number of years. But I think one of the key elements that GBR will have is taking a consistent approach to all accessibility needs, whether they be around design, access, information, and we'll be holding them to account to make sure they do that.
It's been a fantastic discussion. Thank you all for being with us. And apologies to those of you who have put questions on the platform that I didn't get to. I didn't look early enough, so do keep them coming, because I will make sure that on our next debate, I get to them a bit quicker. So thank you very much to all our panelists. It was a really good way to start off with panel one. I feel we could have talked forever, but I'm sure you'll be back with us at another event. Thank you very much. I think now we're going to take time to have a short break. This is your first but not only chance to engage with the speed networking functionality. So do enjoy it, and I'll see you back here in 10 minutes time. Thank you.